I used to joke that the creepiest thing about my parents' house was the half-finished basement and the way the laundry room door never closed all the way. It was this old split level in a quiet neighborhood with streetlights that flicker like they're on a timer. If you walked past our driveway at night, you'd hear crickets and the highway a mile away. Sometimes a train. Nothing dramatic. The kind of place where the scariest news is always a raccoon knocking over the trash cans. It's where I grew up. And because of that, I thought I was immune to whatever weird vibes a creaky house could throw at me. My parents, though, decided to go to Florida for a week at the end of October to celebrate their anniversary. They asked me to house sit because their usual neighbor had a knee replacement and wasn't moving around much. I said sure, obviously. Free laundry and a bigger fridge than mine. I brought a backpack, my laptop, and my parents' golden retriever, Scout, who was basically a sentient throw pillow with a heartbeat and a tail. It started off fine. The first night I microwaved leftover lasagna, watched a dumb movie, and fell asleep on the couch under the crocheted blanket my mom refuses to throw away, even though it smells like dust and some perfume that doesn't exist anymore. Scout snored next to me. He kicked his paws against my leg like he was chasing something in a dream. The house popped and settled the way it always does when the temperature drops, and I remember thinking it was nice to be back. Safe, even. You know how when you're alone, every sound is a little louder? The ice maker sounded like someone pouring gravel into a metal bowl. The dishwasher sounded like it was trying to swallow itself. But all of that was explainable, and I fell asleep without a problem. The second night I was in the upstairs bathroom brushing my teeth when Scout started whining at the top of the basement stairs. Not barking, whining. The kind of whining he does when he really wants something he can't see or reach. He does it at squirrels up trees, at balls under couches, at my attention if I'm on my phone. I figured maybe I'd left his bone downstairs, so I opened the stairway door and flipped on the basement light. The switch is at the top, and it's always been a little loose, like it's not actually attached to the wall. The light clicked on. It washed over the stairs and made this thin triangle on the concrete floor at the bottom. The basement is L-shaped, laundry on the right. A small room with a broken recliner on the left that my dad calls the workshop because it has a pegboard with 2 screwdrivers in a level. Straight ahead is a door that leads to the crawl space under the family room. We used to play hide and seek down there when we were little until my mom realized we were coming up covered in dust and spider webs and said it was off limits. It has this wooden hatch with a ring handle that never quite sits flat. That's the one sound I always remembered about the house at night. The hatch tapping softly when the furnace kicked on and the air shifted, like a heartbeat through wood. Scout stood at the top of the stairs and wagged his tail, but didn't go down. I went first. He followed, stepping so carefully you could hear each paw pad hit the wood. The basement smelled like detergent and damp cardboard and a little like gasoline because of the mower. I walked around the corner, peeked into the workshop, and then looked at the crawlspace hatch. It was tilted open. Not much. Maybe an inch. Enough to see darkness. Enough to notice that I hadn't been down there. Enough to make the back of my neck prick. I told myself my dad probably forgot to latch it last time he was puttering down there. Or the air pressure did it. Something normal. I'm not a paranoid freak. I walked over and nudged the hatch closed with my foot. It made that wooden clack and settled flat. Scout exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. I laughed at myself, tossed his rope toy across the floor, and rattled a quarter in the dryer to make it start again. White noise. control, like you're the one deciding what sounds exist in a space. But that was the first thing. The second thing happened on the third night. My friend Becca called around 10 to gossip about her coworkers like she does, and after we hung up, I decided to take Scout out one last time. The backyard is fenced, which is convenient because it means you can stand on the deck and let your dog take his sweet time picking a spot in the grass without freezing yourself. There's a motion light over the sliding door, but it only covers the first few feet of deck, and the rest is dark unless the neighbor's floodlight hits it. I slid the door open with that sticky hiss and stepped out. Cold air. That smell of leaves and a hint of chimney smoke from somewhere. Scout trotted down the steps, sniffed the air, and then froze. His whole posture changed in this instant, like a cartoon dog seeing a ghost. Tail went down. Head went up. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He stared at the garden shed in the corner. I followed his gaze. The shed is this prefab thing my dad swears he got at a discount. It has double doors that stick when it rains. One time a raccoon got in there and ate half a bag of birdseed, and we found the bag shredded like it lost a fight with a blender. That was my first guess again. Raccoon, possum, maybe a cat, something alive but normal. I took a step toward the stairs to go see. Before my foot hit the first step, the shed doors rattled. Not like wind. Not a small vibration. They rattled like someone on the inside put their shoulder into it. I swear to you, I'm not dramatic. But I turned around like I was pivoting away from a wild animal. I whistled low for Scout, who did not need to be asked twice, and we went inside. I shut the sliding door and locked it. Then I pulled the curtain closed like that would help. I stood there and listened. Nothing. Just my own heartbeat in my ears, and that refrigerator hum that makes you question what silence even is. I told myself I'd check it in the morning, because again, raccoon, possum, maybe a cat. I texted my parents about it on the family chat like, "Your shed is haunted or full of wildlife." My mom sent back a laughing emoji. My dad texted something about get the flashlight and go be a man, and then sent, "JK because he lives in fear of our group chat canceling him for boomer jokes." I let it be. Scout stared at the curtains for a long time, and then fell asleep like dogs do, with total amnesia for anything that isn't a treat or a walk. The next morning I went out to the shed. The doors were closed. There were scuff marks on the inside edge like something had pushed against them. No chewing, no tracks that I could see in the dirt. And when I opened the doors, it smelled like fertilizer and cold plastic. I poked around with a broom and didn't find anything. I convinced myself the wind had done it. It had been gusty. Fine. The fourth day I started to feel watched. You know the feeling. It's that pressure like there's another set of lungs in the room with you. I'm not even going to pretend to be the person who brushes that off. I felt it walking through the hallway upstairs from my old bedroom to the bathroom, like I should turn around and say, "Excuse me." I felt it in the kitchen when I opened the fridge and the light made a squeak. I even felt it in the shower, which is the worst place to feel anything. I kept sliding the curtain open like the world outside it would be different each time. It wasn't. Beige tile, blue bath mat, my face in the mirror with a little steam halo like a saint of anxiety. It got worse at night. Scout took to sleeping with his nose pointed at the bedroom door. He'd huff and twitch every time the hallway settled. I kept the TV on because silence was starting to have a shape. I left the lamp on too, the one on the end table that buzzes when it's warmed up. That is how you know I was really on edge. I am religious about turning off lights. My dad says you can tell how stressed I am by how many lights I leave on. He's not wrong. On the 5th night, I woke up at the exact moment I felt someone step onto the creaky part of the hallway floor. If you grew up in a house with wood floors, you know the spot. The one that complains even when you're tiptoeing. It's like a fingerprint. You could be dropped into that house blindfolded and you'd still know when you hit that spot. It made that sound, that shallow groan, and then 3 knocks on the bedroom door. Not loud, not sharp. Like someone was knocking with the side of their knuckles so they wouldn't wake up the whole house. I did not move. I didn't breathe for a second, and then I took the smallest breath you can take without making a sound. Scout didn't bark. He lifted his head so slowly I felt the air move where his ears went up. He stared at the door, his mouth closed. He didn't growl. He didn't make any sound at all. That was somehow worse. I put my hand on the nightstand and slid it until I felt my phone. I didn't look at the screen. I just curled my hand around it. "Hello?" I said. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Politeness drilled into my bones by 1,000 package deliveries and neighbor drop-ins. You knock. I answer. That's the script. The knocks came again. 3. Same pressure. Same rhythm. The creak of the board shifted like someone put their weight on their heels. Then off again. No footsteps. No voice, just those knocks like punctuation in an empty paragraph. "Who is it?" I asked, which I immediately regretted because it felt like an invitation. "Nothing." I slid out of bed. My heart was beating in my throat. I grabbed the lamp chain and left it on. That's the stupidest detail, but it's what I remember. The way the lamp buzzed as I stood up. I don't know why I wanted it on. Light made it worse in a way. Like if you turn on all the lights, you can see more, which might be the opposite of what you need. I walked to the door. Scout pressed his side against my leg. I put my hand on the knob, and just before I turned it, whoever was on the other side knocked again. 3. Patient, polite knocks. I jerked like I'd touched a fence and took my hand off the knob. I don't mind admitting I almost said nope out loud. Instead, I cleared my throat, said, "I'm calling the police," and held my phone up like anyone on the other side could see it through wood. I waited. I thought maybe I'd hear someone run down the hall. Silence. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. It had that daytime look that houses have at night when the shadows don't make sense. Everything was familiar but misprinted. I stepped out and looked left, looked right. The thermostat glowed 317 in pale green. Down the stairs, the living room had that sodium orange spill from the streetlight. Nothing moved. No air, even. The house was as still as a held breath. I stood there long enough to feel stupid. Then I shut the door and put my head on it. That was when I heard the other knock. It came from inside the closet behind me. The sound was muffled by coats and drywall and the full fact of the door between us, but it was the same rhythm. 3. Soft, polite knocks. I yanked the closet open. My hands were shaking so hard the hangers clicked against each other like teeth. The smell hit me with this weird clarity. Old wood, a plastic storage bin, winter coats with that woolly dust smell, the dryer sheet box we keep on the shelf. Everything normal. Everything in its place. No person, no animal, no nothing. The sound of my own blood was so loud that for a second I thought it was a low hum in the walls, I shut the closet and went downstairs and turned on every light in the house. Kitchen, living room, hall, bathroom. Even the lamp in the corner nobody turns on because it makes you feel like you're being interrogated by a cozy owl. I walked through the garage and looked at the door there. Still locked. The deadbolt had that chipped paint pattern you only get from years of being turned by the same hand. I checked the slider in the back. Locked. The back door. Locked. I walked through the rooms like I was the final contestant on a game show where the prize is maybe not getting murdered. Nothing. It took an hour to convince myself to go back upstairs. When I did, I left the hall light on. I shut my bedroom door, but didn't lock it, because I'm not going to trap myself in a room if something really is wrong. Scout didn't go back to sleep. He lay there with his head on his paws and his eyes open. The streetlight changed color outside somewhere, and the ceiling got a little darker. I didn't tell my parents about the knocking. I told Becca the next day on the phone, and she said, "You are living in a Goosebumps book," and told me to buy a baseball bat. I bought a flashlight with a heavy handle and a ridiculous package of batteries, and felt slightly better, because there's something about holding an object with weight that makes you feel like a person again. That afternoon I did the thing I had been putting off. I opened the crawlspace hatch. I grabbed a bandana from the drawer and tied it over my mouth like a bargain bandit. And then I hauled up the wooden hatch using the ring handle. It lifted easily. It always does. The dark under there is different from normal darkness. It's granular. It soaks sound up like a towel. The beam of the new flashlight cut through it and landed on old insulation that looked like cotton candy glued to splintered beams. Dust motes looked like bugs. I lowered myself onto my stomach and slid in, which is a decision I would not make again even if you paid me cash. The space under the family room is about 3 feet high. Dirt floor. You can see the concrete wall like a smooth horizon, and then the guts of the house above you. The heater ducts hang low, and if you bump them with your shoulder, dust shakes loose like a sigh. There are old plastic buckets on one side, a sheet of plywood leaning against a support. My dad told me once that when they bought the house, the foundation had a hairline crack that the inspector called cosmetic, which is a haunted word to use for something that holds the building up. He sealed it with concrete and said it was fine. It was probably fine. This is the way I talk to myself. I crawled. The flashlight was ridiculous bright, but everything still felt far. It smelled like the inside of an old library if the books were made of dirt. My elbow bumped something. I thought it was the plywood. But when I put the light on it, I saw a small stack of things tucked into the angle where the wall meets the house frame. There were 3 objects. A mason jar filled with what looked like gravel. A pair of kids' scissors with blue handles and rusty blades. And a Polaroid. The Polaroid was face down. I stared at it for a while before I picked it up. It had been there long enough that the edge had curled, and the white border was gray with dust. I brushed it off with the side of my hand and turned it over. It was a picture of our living room. It had that Polaroid look like the color was trying to remember itself. You could see the couch and the lamp and the little table with the bowl my mom keeps the mail in. The blinds were partly open, so there was this ladder of light on the carpet. And there, asleep on the couch under the crocheted blanket, was me. From that first night. Head back, mouth slightly open, TV glow on my face. I don't want to be dramatic, but I almost threw up. The bandana was suddenly a bad idea, and I ripped it down and breathed in all that dirt air. I went very still and waited because it felt like the entire earth was about to shift. It didn't. The house above me was quiet and dumb like a sleeping giant. But the photo in my hand was real, and the dust on my skin was real. And something in the crawl space, some person, at some point, had taken a picture of me sleeping. I held onto the flashlight like it could turn into a weapon by sheer force of wanting, and I backed out of the crawl space. I didn't run because there wasn't anywhere to run, but I moved as fast as you can move on your elbows without scraping your entire torso off. When I hit the concrete floor, I tossed the photo onto the dryer like it was hot. I slammed the hatch shut and then put the heaviest thing I could find on top of it, which was a laundry basket full of towels and the paint cans from the workshop. If you ask me why I thought that would help, I don't have an answer for you. Maybe it was ritual. Maybe it was to feel like I was doing anything. I took a picture of the Polaroid with my phone. I texted it to Becca with the words, "Found this under the house." She called me immediately and said 6 sentences in a row, without breathing, about calling the police and moving out and whether I was pranking her. I told her I wasn't. I told her I was going to call the police. Then I didn't, because I had a thought that felt like someone else put it in my head. What if there's a camera in the house, and the person is watching you right now make these decisions? I stood in the kitchen and slowly turned in a circle like the worst ballerina in the world. The house looked exactly how it always looked. I stared at the smoke detector, because of course you hear stories. I pulled a chair under it and popped the cover off. Battery, dust, no camera. I checked the thermostat, the vents, the light fixtures, the slats of the blinds. I checked the weird knot in the wood above the door in the hall that looks like an eye. I checked behind the TV, which means I moved the entertainment center very carefully and found 3 dead flies, an ancient quarter, and a tangle of cords, but nothing else. I checked the bedside lamp and knocked over a water glass and soaked a library book I wasn't actually reading. I checked the bathroom fan and cut my finger on the little metal piece, which made the world go sharp for a second like a filter. I put a Band-Aid on and stared at my own face. I looked tired and stupid and scared. Then the landline rang. I have to explain the landline. My parents keep it for emergencies, though what emergency involves having worse service is beyond me. It's this white cordless phone on a charging base on the kitchen counter. It rings like a bird trapped in a plastic jar. It almost never rings. When it does, it's always a scam, or my aunt who refuses to adapt to the concept of a smartphone. It rang like the house was trying to cough. I looked at it like I had never seen a phone before. It rang again. I picked it up. "Hello?" I said, and I could hear the quaver in it. I had this sensation like I was calling up from a well, and the words weren't going to reach the surface in time. There was a sound at first like a hand accidentally brushing a microphone. Then, very clearly, a voice said, "Hello?" It was my voice. I froze. The sound was wrong because it wasn't a recording. It had that live texture, the little breaths, the throat crackle. I don't know how else to describe it. It sounded like me, 5 inches to the left, calling back at me through a tunnel. "Who is this?" I said, because that's the script. "Who is this?" my voice said back, perfectly overlapped. Not the way an echo delays, but like a person waiting for you at the next line of a script. I hung up. I didn't slam it because the house already felt like it was going to crack. I set the phone down like it was a raw egg. I stood very still and listened. I heard nothing. I heard everything. My ears rang. When the landline rang again, immediately, I backed away from the counter like it might explode. It rang until it didn't. The silence after it stopped was worse. It felt like someone in the other room had just stopped talking and was waiting to see if I moved. I did what every idiot in a scary movie does. I started talking to the empty air, because silence was ruining me. "Okay," I said to the kitchen, to the whole house. "I don't know who you are, but I'm calling the police now." I picked up my cell and dialed 911. I felt like a cop was going to pick up and say no, just to mess with me. Because this whole situation felt made up, like I'd fallen into a story where you half expect the author to pop out of a cabinet and applaud you. The dispatcher answered and my voice fell apart a little. I told her my name and the address, and that there had been someone in the house, or under the house, and that I had found a photograph, and that someone was calling the landline with my voice. The dispatcher was calm in a way that felt like a medication. She asked me if I could get to a safe place. I said I was in the kitchen with the back door and the front door both locked, and that the dog was with me. She told me to stay on the line. She told me officers were on their way. I cried then, but only a little. It was the kind of crying you do when you've been holding something heavy and someone says they'll help. My body took the permission and shook. I watched the front door like that would make the future move faster. I held the landline in my other hand, and the combination was bizarre. Like 2 centuries of technology were huddled together in my palms. The dispatcher asked me questions. Did I see anyone? Did I hear anything besides the knocking? Did I have a camera system? I told her no, yes, no. She told me to stay on the line. She told me the officers were close. She asked me if I felt safe. I said I didn't know. That felt honest and useless at the same time. The landline rang again. I flinched so hard I almost hung up on the dispatcher. She said, "Is that the other phone?" I said yes. She said, "Do not answer it." I said, "Okay." Scout whined like the sound was drilling into his teeth. The landline rang until it stopped. Then there were 3 knocks at the front door. Not the polite knuckles on wood kind this time. These were heavy, like the person's hand was more bone than skin. I told the dispatcher someone was at the door. She said the officers weren't there yet and to not open it. I said, "Okay." I stood 3 rooms away from the door and felt the knocks in my sternum. The knocks stopped. Then I heard them at the back sliding door, sharp against the glass like a bird. Then the side door. Then the hallway wall. The sound traveled, not like footsteps, but like a hand moving along the skin of the house. Knocking. 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 My name came through the vents from nowhere in my own voice. "Hey," it said, conversational, easy. "Hey, let me in." I slid down the cabinets until I was on the floor. I put my hand on Scout's head for something that was alive and soft. He pressed his skull into my palm like it would help. The sirens came like a salvation song. Blue light bled across the blinds. The knocking stopped. Everything stopped. The dispatcher told me the officers were at the door. I stood up on legs that didn't feel like they wanted to be attached to my body anymore. And I opened the door with the chain still on and saw a uniform, and then 2 faces that looked exactly like you want a cop's face to look when you've been through something. They came in and did the whole sweep, guns out, voices low. They smelled like cold air and leather. One of them stayed with me and asked the same questions the dispatcher had. I answered and felt purged by the repetition, like maybe by saying it out loud enough times it would make logical sense. The other officer checked the backyard, the garage, the basement. He called out clear for each room until he got to the crawl space. "Did you put these here?" he asked. I said, "What?" "The paint cans on the hatch," he said. "Yes," I said, suddenly embarrassed in a school kid way. He lifted the hatch and shined his flashlight down. He was down there a while. When he came up, his face looked less like reassurance and more like a tightrope. "There are signs someone's been staying down there," he said. "Food wrappers, a blanket, footprints. We'll dust what we can dust and do a canvas of the neighborhood." He said canvas like the noun, not the fabric. Police talk. I nodded like I spoke his language. He looked at the photo on the counter and then at me. "We'll take that." "Is it recent?" I asked, for some reason thinking if the photo was older, I could put it on some shelf in my brain marked, "That's a thing that happened once." He studied it with his head tilted and then slid it into a plastic bag. "Looks recent to me," he said. "We'll send a unit to do extra patrols tonight." They left me with a paper full of case numbers and things to expect. The house felt different after they were gone. Not better, but clarified. The way the air in a room changes after someone says, "I love you," or "We're moving." It had a fact to it. If there had been doubt before, there wasn't now. Someone had been in the house. If you prefer a rational horror, here you go. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the hallway and the clock and 3 stupid episodes of some cooking show where they tell you a cake can be whimsical, like it's a personality trait. The next morning I called my parents. I didn't want to, but it felt like a necessary confession. My mom went quiet in that way that makes you imagine the paragraphs behind her silence. My dad said he was calling the locksmith and that he'd have cameras installed and that he was going to drive back from Florida if I wanted him to. I told him not to. It felt like letting the thing win, whatever it was. I told them I was fine. I wasn't. But I was also stubborn, which sometimes looks like bravery if you squint. The locksmith came and did locksmith things and left the smell of metal and a handful of keys that looked identical but weren't. I called a company about cameras and I scheduled an appointment because this is how adults handle fear now. Subscriptions and cloud storage. That evening I took Scout out back again and stared at the shed until the motion light clicked off. I wondered if the person under the house had ever been in there. The idea landed with a solid thunk in my chest. I kept the sliding door open and held the flashlight. I thought about how I was going to tell this story someday, and how in that telling there would have to be a turn. You know what I mean? A door that actually opens. A shadow that finally shows itself. A scream with a person at the end of it. If this was a movie, this is where someone would do something cinematic, like finding a hidden passage in the shed that leads to a tunnel under the foundation. But it was just a shed. Cobwebs. A cracked terracotta pot. A spider the size of my thumbnail that looked like it could bench press me. Normal. It was around midnight when the house did the thing that made me understand this was more than a person problem. It was raining. The kind of skinny rain that looks like strings from a god. The sound on the roof was nice and made my brain move slower in a way that felt helpful. I was dozing on the couch because sleep near the front door felt smarter. Scout was in a puddle next to me. The TV was on with the volume down and the captions on, and the words "gentle music" kept popping up underneath a commercial, with a family smiling at the sky. The TV flickered, and then shut off. That happens sometimes when there's weather. The room snapped into a darker kind of dark. The digital clock on the cable box went dead. I clicked the lamp. Nothing. Power out. I looked to the kitchen to see if the fridge light was still doing its thing. It wasn't. I stood up and felt that carnival funhouse version of your house that happens in a blackout. It's like a rearranged body you're trying to walk through. 3 knocks on the inside of the living room wall. The sound was wrong immediately. It wasn't knuckles on drywall. It was like someone tapping on the underside of a table you're sitting at. Hollow. Close. Inside. It came from the wall between the living room and the hallway. Then the wall to the kitchen. Then the floor under the couch. A polite rapping like a neighbor asking for sugar from the other side of a thin world. "Stop," I said, out loud and pointless. The house ignored me. The knocks moved like a hand dragging a ring over wood on the other side of the skin of the house. The sound traveled to the front door and knocked there, once, and then I heard the deadbolt turn. It didn't open. It just turned. A 1/4 inch, like a breath. I grabbed the flashlight. I shined it at the door, and the beam caught something like a smear at about shoulder height. It was a handprint. It looked wet. It had the shape of fingers, splayed, almost playful. I took 2 steps without meaning to. The light shook in my hand. The smear was the color of dirty water. I touched it with the tip of my finger and it smelled like earth. Not dirt. Earth. Wet leaves. Worms. That smell that hits you when you dig into a garden and the shovel cuts a line through soil like a word. I backed up. "You need to stop," I said again, like I was telling a dog to drop a sock. The house waited the exact amount of time someone waits to make you think they've listened. Then the landline rang. No power, but the landline was powered by the phone line. Old tech. You learn something every day. I stood there with the flashlight pointed at nothing, and the other hand hovering over the phone like it might bite. It rang until it didn't. The silence afterward was as thick as bread. I picked it up because I am not strong, apparently, and because the waiting had become its own noise. I said nothing. The voice on the other end said nothing. And then, very softly, my voice said, "I can see you." I set the phone down and did not hang up. I put it on the counter with the line still open, like maybe the connection would trap whatever it was, like a bug under a cup. I walked slowly to the hallway, because that was the direction the knocks had traveled last. I shined the flashlight down. Every framed photo on the wall had the glass smeared with those wet handprints in neat lines, as if some careful person had decided each face needed a touch. My high school graduation photo had one right over my face, 5 drips like rain. Behind me, the crawl space hatch banged. Not a little shift, not that heartbeat tap I remembered. It banged like someone threw their shoulder into it from below. The paint cans jumped on the wood and landed with a metal clink like applause. Then again, the ring handle scraped as if whatever was under there had gripped it and meant to pull it through the wood. "No," I said, which is such a dumb word in the face of a whole phenomena. But it was all I had. No. Scout did the one thing he hadn't done in days. He barked. It wasn't vicious. He is not a vicious dog. It was sharp and scared and had my whole fear in it. He planted his paws and barked at the hatch. The banging stopped. Silence. a second that stretched thin like sugar. The ring handle lifted on its own and then dropped, metal on wood, a polite little clink like a wink. Then a voice from the vent above the couch, my voice again, sighed like it was laughing and said, "I like your dog." I grabbed Scout's collar. I didn't do it because I knew what to do next. I did it because I needed to hold a body that was not mine. I dragged him to the front door. I threw the new deadbolt and the chain. I unlocked both. I flung the door open to dark rain, and the shape of my car, and the world. The outside smelled like wet asphalt and sage. I didn't have my keys. I didn't care. We ran. We ran down the driveway and into the street, which was empty, which made it worse. The house behind me had a square of black where the living room window was. I expected a face. I got nothing. That nothing was huge. It was a mouth of a whale. I went to the neighbor's house, the one with the knee replacement. I pounded on the door and felt like I was going to faint. Lights clicked on inside. Mrs. Powell opened the door wearing a robe like a tent and holding a flashlight that looked like she could land planes with it. Scout barreled past her and lay down on her entry rug like a beached seal. I cried again, in a worse way. She put a hand on my back and said my name in a tone like a lullaby. We sat in her kitchen. I told her the short version because the long version had become a way to drown. She called her son, who is the kind of person who uses the phrase, "come over there right now," and he did. He is a big guy who has opinions about everything, and he took my flashlight and went into my house the way a sane person walks into a haunted house at a carnival. He came back a few minutes later with an expression that said he was going to pretend nothing was wrong to keep me from passing out. "Place is clear," he lied. I could tell he wanted to tell the truth. I could tell the truth was one step away from a whole different kind of night. Power's out on the whole block. Probably messed up the lines. You can stay here until it's back. We did. Mrs. Powell made tea because that's what people do when the world doesn't make sense. Tea like it's a key. I sat on her floral couch with a towel wrapped around Scout because he was damp from the sprint. He put his head on my knee and fell asleep like nothing could possibly matter if a nap was an option. In the morning, the lights were back in the neighborhood, and the sky looked like it hadn't ever held rain. I went home with a dread that had become almost academic, like I was walking into a museum about the worst night of my life. Everything was where it should be, which means nothing was where it should be. The handprints had dried into pale brown maps. The crawlspace hatch had moved 1 inch. The landline was off the hook, the open line making that dead air hiss like a whisper. I hung it up. The camera company was supposed to come that afternoon. I added a locksmith to recheck the locks just for the ritual of it. I thought maybe rituals were the only infrastructure available. The officers came back too because of the call the night before. They did that cop walk where they touch everything with 2 fingers and tilt their heads like dogs hearing a word they know. They told me again that there were signs someone had been living in the crawl space. They found a thin pillow under the plastic sheet. They found wrappers from granola bars my mom buys in a big box from the warehouse store. They found a little glint of a mirror, as if someone had tucked it under a beam to watch, which made me taste metal. They found a very small pile of dirt under a vent that made no sense until you thought about hands. They didn't find a person. They didn't find fingerprints that matched anything in their system. They didn't find a name to attach to what was happening. You can't arrest a sound. You can't handcuff a voice. I slept at Becca's after that. Then at my apartment, I told my parents I was not coming back to their house alone, and they didn't argue because they are not villains in a story. They're just people. They hired a company to seal the crawl space with new hardware. They put in those cameras you can check from your phone. My dad had motion lights put up that make the backyard look like an interrogation scene at midnight. For a while, nothing happened. The house went back to being a house. I wish that was the end. I wish it was just a story about a person living under a house, and how that is a kind of horror. And that's that. That could have been enough. A month later, in my apartment, I woke up to 3 soft knocks on my bedroom door. The thing about trauma is that it builds a vocabulary in your bones. I recognized the rhythm before my brain brought the memory up. My mouth went dry. I reached for my phone and opened the camera app like that would do anything. I live alone. The only person who could have knocked was me, messing with myself in a dream. I told myself that. I told myself it was a neighbor in the hall, and the sound traveled. I told myself it was water in the pipes. I told myself so many things. I sat up slowly, put my feet on the floor, and waited. 3 knocks. Closer. Same gentle tempo. Like someone who has all the time in the world. I stood up and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The light from the living room made a rectangle on the carpet like a stage set. The door to the coat closet was closed. I did not touch it. I didn't need to. I could feel the implication of it like a finger trailing along my spine. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The preview said, "Hey." Just that. No punctuation. I stared at it for a long time, then swiped. The message opened. There was 1 word, then a photo. The word was missed. The photo was a shot of my apartment living room from my bedroom doorway. You could see me, small in the corner of the frame, opening the door. You could see the couch and the crooked candle I never fix. You could see the vent at the top of the wall above the bookshelf. In the corner of the photo, near the vent, there was a shadow shaped like the idea of a person. Not a person. You know how sometimes your brain fills in a thing that might not be there? It looked like that, but harder. Like it had edges. I did the adult thing and called the police again. I told them what I told them before, with the variation of a new address and a different arrangement of shame. They came and walked through my new place and told me I should be careful about what I post online. I showed them I hadn't posted anything with my address, so they pivoted to, "These things happen." They filed a report. Everybody filled in boxes. I changed the locks. Again. I covered the vent in my living room with a metal screen that you can screw into the wall. I started sleeping with white noise on, because at least then, if there were knocks, I could tell myself the whoosh was covering them. I stopped reading stories like the one I'm telling you because I didn't want to learn new vocabulary for fear. Sometimes I still wake up at 3:17, which is dumb and specific and too on the nose to be anything but a bad joke written by the part of my brain that thinks narrative matters. Sometimes I stand in my kitchen and turn in a slow circle and look at light fixtures and smoke detectors and the backs of framed photos. I am learning how to live with the idea that a place can have a memory, and that sometimes the memory will not be yours. I haven't been back to my parents' place alone since then. When I go over for dinner, I bring dessert, and my sense of humor like armor. We all pretend the crawl space is just wood and dust, and the occasional spider with biceps. We talk about weather and books, and the neighbor who insists that leaf blowers are a personality. We pet Scout, who is living his best life not knowing anything. Sometimes my dad will say something like, "Remember when you put all those paint cans on the hatch?" And we all laugh, and the laugh is better than silence. A few weeks ago, my mom handed me a plastic storage bin full of old stuff. High school flyers, a hoodie with the letter of a team I didn't care about, a beat-up binder. At the bottom, there was a little notebook I used to keep dumb sketches in. I flipped through it. On the last page, in my handwriting, there was a list of chores my mom had made for me when I was, 10. It said things like, dust living room, clean bathroom mirror, shake out rug. At the very bottom, someone had added a line in smaller writing. It said, "Be polite. Knock first. No smiley face. No flourish." I don't remember writing it. I don't think I did. When I showed my mom, she said, "That's your handwriting," like it was a verdict. I looked at it until the letters blurred into the idea of an alphabet. I told myself my brain could have put that there because brains are great at stories, and I'm not above scaring myself on purpose. But the part of me that knows rhythms and timings and the way a house sounds when it breathes just looked at that sentence and remembered a hand, somewhere unseen, rapping 3 times on the other side of what you think is solid. Sometimes the world is a person in a crawl space with a blanket and a mirror. Sometimes it is a thing that can learn to sound like you and knows where the creaky board is and how often you wake up and what it smells like when you are afraid. I don't have a moral for you beyond this. If you feel watched, maybe you are. If you hear a knock that feels like a question, you don't have to answer it. One last thing, because it's the part I think about when the apartment is too quiet. On the night I ran to Mrs. Powell's, when I opened the front door and the rain hit me, and I felt the nothingness of that black square of window behind me, I glanced over my shoulder once, just once. The vent above the couch was a darker square within a dark wall. For a second, I swear I saw fingers curl over the edge from the other side. Not a person, not a clear shape, just the idea of fingers, like something was learning how to hold on. I tell myself that's not real. I tell myself the brain is a great liar. I tell myself it's better to be the liar than the thing that believes in knocking. Then, some nights, I get a text from an unknown number that says, "Hey," and I turn my phone face down and put it in a drawer like old correspondence I am done with. I sleep mostly. I dream of basements that open like mouths and sheds that rattle and handprints on glass that don't ever dry. And when I wake up at 3:17, I listen to the white noise and to Scout breathing in my memory, and to the apartment making house sounds. And I wait. If the knock comes, I don't answer. I don't say hello. I don't ask who it is. I let the question hang there, like a coat I'm not going to wear. Because polite or not, some doors are meant to stay closed. Okay, so, imagine hearing this from your friend at 2 a.m. over cheap coffee, because that's exactly how I'm about to tell it. No dramatized voice, no spooky radio host cadence, just me, telling you the worst night of my life and why I still sleep with the TV on and the AC off, even in July. I work, or worked, I guess, as a med tech in a mid-size hospital. We weren't a trauma center, but bad stuff still found us. Friday nights were always loud with the sounds of people who believed vodka made them invisible to cars. I got used to the hum, the vents, the squeak of shoes on tile, monitors beeping like digital crickets. Hospitals have their own weather. fluorescent storms. Time doesn't move right in there. You know how it is? I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the morgue most nights. That was basement. That was someone else's routine. I knew the way, though. Down past the vending machines nobody trusted. Through the door with the peeling authorized personnel only sticker. The air got colder and thicker the lower you went, dense with the smell of bleach and something behind the bleach, like a hand pressed over a mouth. I'd been there enough times to drop off lab specimens or pick up some paperwork the last shift forgot. I knew the morgue tech too. His name was Walt, a wiry guy with those coffee-stained hands and a sense of humor that lived permanently in October. He wore Halloween socks year-round. His desk had a little black cat statue with chipped ears and a Sharpie mustache. Great guy. He's not the villain here, in case your brain needs a target. Anyway, this night, I was upstairs when everything I thought I knew about dying turned into a sick joke. I collapsed. That's simple. No warning besides a head rush and a weird copper taste in my mouth. I was between patient 3 and the nurse's station, and then I wasn't. I went down like a puppet with the strings cut. I remember the floor coming up, the stink of ammonia, a voice yelling my name like I was in trouble. Then it all folded inward. If you've ever fainted, you know there's a soft rectangle of time where your awareness tries to be helpful. You pick up on sounds, distant and muffled. You register pressure, like hands on your shoulders. You hear words without meaning. My rectangle lasted longer than it should have. I heard the slap of shoes, the panic of someone slamming buttons on a wall. I heard my own breath go from winded to steady, slow, too slow. Here's where it gets murky. I've told this to people and they nod along like they're trying to decide if they should call someone. But I promise, hand to whatever, this is how it happened to me. I was inside my body like it was an old house. I could hear footsteps in the upstairs hallway but couldn't climb the stairs to see who was there. I felt the light from the fluorescent fixtures hitting my eyelids, and it felt like weight. The bright weight of light. A doctor's voice came through trying to be calm. They asked questions I couldn't answer. Can you hear me? Yes, I could. But my mouth was a locked door, and they didn't have the key. They did the things. I won't recount every step because it's a blur of contact and cold stethoscope metal and a cuff squeezing my arm. My pulse. I didn't feel it. They didn't either. And yeah, that's the part that still makes me nauseous. Something misfired with me. Something important. And then someone called a time. That's what we do for the ones who don't come back. We call time. Someone said it out loud, like drawing a line on a chalkboard. And suddenly I was on the wrong side of the line. When people talk about being declared dead, they don't tell you about the paperwork, the toe tag, the polite distance everyone adopts, like sorrow is contagious. I felt hands move me. My head tilted. My mouth opened. The air on my teeth was cold and smelled like disinfectant. A sheet fell over my face and the world dimmed. I tried to speak. Honest to God, I did. Somewhere, something in me barked the order. But it was like yelling a command through 10 locked doors. The air didn't move right in my throat. My chest had weight on it. I was a voice trapped in a basement, shouting up a narrow stairwell. They moved me. The motion was smooth and clinical and endless. Elevator dings sound different when the elevator isn't for the living. The doors sigh like they've been doing this forever. Basement. The change in air pressure was instant, a slap inside my sinuses. The temperature dropped. That specific morgue cold isn't just cold, it's purposeful. It's the cold of storage, of we're keeping something the way it is. Heels clicked. Gurney wheels groaned. A hand, Walt's hand probably, touched my shoulder in that human way that makes me ache when I think about it. There was no malice here. There was procedure and grief, and the kind of tired you can only wear if you've done this too many times. The sheet was pulled back from my face. Just a second. A quiet voice said something to me out of habit, maybe a goodbye. I wanted to say his name so badly. Walt. Hey, joke's on you. I'm alive. This is a weird prank, right? But my tongue was glue. My jaw wouldn't. Then came the zipper. That sound is in my bones now. The body bag. My world went matte black, with a hint of tacky plastic against my lips. The zipper breathes if you put your mouth right up against it. Did you know that? A ghost of air sneaks through the teeth. I found that out later. In a way I wish I hadn't. They tagged my toe. I felt the tug, not pain. I think I made a noise, but it might have been only in my head. They slid something hard under me, transfer board, and then the shift, my weight moving from an open world to a closed one. The door to the refrigerator was a heavy metal slab with a latch that sounds like a prison door in movies. You know the tone I mean. Final. They slid me in. The rails were smooth and adjusted to the gurney with a practiced push. My shoulder bumped a sidewall and jolted out a spark in my mind so bright I thought, say something. This is it. Say something now. I forced my throat to work. It made a wet swallow. The bag interior tasted like plastic and faint lemon cleaner. Someone said something about paperwork. The door swung shut. The latch fell. The world went from quiet to dead quiet. I thought, absurdly, about light. I'd always believed darkness was an absence, but there in that drawer it had a texture. It was a felt blanket pressed to my face. It was a room where the walls were an inch away from your skin, and the ceiling was the next breath you couldn't take. I tried to inhale too fast and choked on the bag's little bubble of air. You can taste your own panic. It's metallic, like a penny sucked dry. What saved me, if you want to call it saved, is that the morgue fridge wasn't completely airtight. They never are. You need air circulation, or things get ugly in a way even the pros don't talk about. Air drifted in through tiny seams around the door and the zipper. Not much, but enough to be there. Enough to give me the idea that I might not die immediately, even if it felt like I already had. I started counting, because that's what I do when I'm afraid. It's a dumb childhood habit, like I could stack numbers between me and the bad thing. I got to 47 before I caught something through the door. A sound, barely there. A shuffle, like someone dragging a cardboard box across tile. Then footsteps. Then quiet. The morgue was supposed to be empty. Night shift down there is a one-person job. Walt had gone to log me, I assumed, or maybe to take a bathroom break. The steps I heard weren't his. They were too light, too uncertain, like someone walking barefoot. I told myself stories. That's another thing your brain does when the walls close in. It writes short, helpful fiction. It's the condenser, I told myself. Refrigeration does that. Pipes knocking, air pressure equalizing. I recited parts of a training manual I barely remembered. I tried to turn the world into a diagram I could label. Something touched the front of my drawer. Not a person, not a hand. It was subtler than that. The rails on the side sang a note they shouldn't sing unless weight is shifting, like metal acknowledging metal. The slightest stall in the machinery of stillness. I held my breath and immediately regretted it. When you hold your breath inside a plastic bag, inside a metal drawer, inside a cold room, your heart starts punching at your ribs like it woke up angry. I thought about my heart in third person. His heart pounded, like I was reading my own autopsy report in bad fiction. I tried to move my foot, then my fingers, anything. There was a flutter in my right index finger, that tiny, desperate flicker. That was enough hope to be cruel. Another sound. This one behind me, or beneath me. Orientation gets funny in there. It was tapping. 3 taps, patient and polite. Waited several seconds, then 3 more. The way a neighbor might knock if they really didn't want to bother you. It came again. Slow. Tap, tap, tap. I tried to answer. The bag crackled around my shoulders as I lifted my elbow an inch and let it fall. It barely made a noise, but the tapping stopped. Silence swelled until I could hear the skitter of my own spit moving down my throat. Then the taps came from the other side. Closer. The vibration shivered through the rails into my spine. It felt like the drawer next to me was communicating in a language that hadn't been used since ships signaled through fog. This should be the part where I tell you I don't believe in ghosts, that I'm rational, that I can explain a list of mundane things that happen to line up into a prank the universe played on me. But here's the thing. I don't know what I believe anymore. I only know what happened. Something in the drawer beside me slid, very slightly. Then the faintest rasp of plastic on metal, like the bag over there was shifting. A breath that wasn't mine condensed against a surface I couldn't see. I said, in my head, over and over, I'm alive. Like if I thought it hard enough it would leak out through the seams. Like it would travel under the floor and up the stairs to someone who could do something about it. The cold reached my teeth. My jaw started to chatter. A tiny percussion inside the coffin of everything. The zipper pressed against my nose. The air was warm only where the bag stuck to my lips. Every time I breathed out, the plastic rose away, then came back on the inhale, whispering, letting me have just enough. My stomach clenched and released, trying to vomit up the emptiness. I fought it because I knew what would happen if I threw up in that bag. Every muscle that would listen to me went tense. My back arched. I focused everything on one task. Move your foot. If you can move your foot, you can kick the door. If you can kick the door, you can make a sound that isn't a prayer. My big toe twitched. That was real. That wasn't in my head. I bent my mind around that toe and willed it to curl. It curled. Pain shot up my calf. Not because there was anything wrong with the muscle, but because pain is the way relief masks itself when it arrives late to a party. I tried for the ankle. The ankle came along like a reluctant child. I breathed faster than was smart. The bag was all I could smell. The cold slapped my lungs each time. Come on, I said without sound. Come on, come on. The tapping, remember the tapping, came again, right on cue, but now there was a difference. It wasn't hesitant anymore. It had rhythm. It had a countdown feel. 3 taps, 2, 1. The rail jumped. That's how it felt. Like whatever was on the other side had shoved its drawer. The jolt rippled through the bank of metal boxes. Mine rattled. I kicked forward and hit the inside of my door with the top of my foot. It made the saddest thud, a padded punch drowned by steel and refrigerant, and the muffling effect of being dead to the world. I did it again, harder. This time something slid. The door didn't, not yet. But I heard a latch sing, a tiny, high, hopeful note. The handle outside, if you've never seen one, they're simple. You pull them sideways, the latch retracts, the door swings. But from inside, the latch is a blind god. You can pray to it, but it doesn't care. I kicked again, aiming where I thought the latch must be, and hit it wrong. Pain burst in my toes, bright enough to be a new kind of light. I'd like to tell you I kept my cool. I didn't. I sobbed. Quiet, stupid sobs that ate up air and gave nothing back. The bag flexed in and out. Moisture gathered and ran down my cheek into my ear, making a line of cold that felt like a knife's edge. My tongue stuck to my teeth. The toe tag string burned where it rubbed. The steps came back. Real steps, shoe steps, coming closer. I froze like freezing was going to help me. The drawer next to me tapped once, sharply, like now. I kicked. I threw everything into it. Calf, knee, thigh, the grinding hinge of my hip. The door gave an inch. I felt it. The latch must have been just misaligned enough. Cold air poured over my mouth and nose. New air, not bag air. The rush of it made me dizzy with gratitude. I turned my face toward that sliver, pressed my lips to the seam, and screamed. It sounded like an animal. I'll own that. It was ragged and meat-sick and broke right in the middle. But it was loud. It was loud enough that the footsteps stopped. There was a half-second of that perfect charged silence, and then someone ran. Keys clanked. A hand smacked metal. The handle snapped. The door swung open so fast the rails shrieked. I tumbled forward off the tray. The body bag skittered like a flayed fish. My face hit cold tile, and the taste of real air hit the back of my throat like a shot. I gasped so hard I got dizzy. Hands were on me. Voices followed, startled and swearing and terrified in a way I'd never heard from Walt. The zipper flew back and light, harsh and fluorescent and absolutely beautiful, hit my eyes. The first breath without plastic was bright and tasted like the entire world. I coughed it back up and took another. "Oh my God," someone said. "Walt. Definitely Walt." His voice went high in a way that would have been funny anywhere else. "Oh my God. Oh my God. I checked. He was crying. I didn't have room in me for anger about that. I grabbed his wrist like it was a rope and tried to climb back into being a person. Everything after had a frame around it, like I was watching through glass. Alarms, the stampede of a rescue wheel, hands tugging, lifting, covering me with warm blankets that smelled like dryer sheets and safety. A doctor saying my name over and over with equal parts apology and astonishment. Someone saying no pulse, no respiration, and asking questions with answers that didn't fit the world we thought we lived in. I tried to say I'd heard tapping, that there was someone else. The words fed themselves to cotton and came out thick. "Next," I said. "Next drawer." It sounded like I was sedated. Maybe I was. The adrenaline that got me out ran a zero-sum game I was losing. Walt flicked a look at the bank of drawers. His face went stony in that morgue way, a professional blank. He stood up, pulled his keys back into his hand, and opened the next one. Empty. The tray slid out with a sterile squeal. The bag on it, there wasn't one. The tag for that slot was clipped near the corner, though, labeled with neat block letters and a date that made my stomach flip. Walt frowned at it, like it was misbehaving. He slid that one shut and opened the one below, then above. He moved down the line, his movements turning sharp. "It's quiet down here," he said finally, defensive. "You hear pipes. You hear the compressor kick. Sometimes the building shifts. It's not haunted." He said that like he'd had to say it before, probably late at night to himself. I didn't argue because arguing takes more air than I wanted to spend. But part of me was still in that darkness, listening for the language of metal. They took me upstairs. I wasn't dead anymore on paper, which is a bigger deal than you'd think. There's a process for when the dead come back, a meeting of protocols that don't like each other. Forms, calls, legal words said in tight voices, apologies delivered with the care you use to set down an egg that's already cracked. They kept me for observation. My body had a lot to say about what happened to it. My throat felt like I'd swallowed needles. My toes throbbed with life, and that was the best kind of pain I've ever known. Family came. Friends. They talked to me like there was a glass dome over my head, and they were tapping it with their rings. No one told ghost stories at my bedside. That's not how normal people comfort you. But when I closed my eyes, the hospital went dark and cold again, and I was back in the drawer. That sound of the zipper, the breath that wasn't mine. Here's the part I don't tell often, because it makes people tilt their heads like they're trying to make the weirdness roll off. That night, after everyone left and the room dimmed to that blue TV light hush, I heard tapping again. Not from the hall, not from the vent, from the cabinet under the sink. 3, then 2, then 1. I told myself to stand, to open it, to force a punchline out of the universe. I didn't. I lay there in a hospital bed with rails that looked a lot like the ones downstairs, and watched the cabinet door like it might open and breathe. In the morning, my neighbor across the hall, the older guy with the oxygen hiss and a son who worked nights, was gone. Not unusual for a hospital. People go home. People go elsewhere. The nurse who came in to check my vitals said cheerfully that he'd been discharged. I nodded like a person agrees when they don't want to make a problem. When they discharged me 3 days later, the sun felt aggressive. The world smelled like warm car interiors and hot pavement. I breathed it until my lungs hurt, then breathed more. I didn't go back to work right away. I told my manager I needed time, because you can't be around the machines that keep people alive if you're still arguing with death about fine print. They said, "Take all the time I needed," in the voice of someone who wants to be kind, but also needs a schedule filled. I didn't hold it against them. For a week, I slept with my closet door open because I liked seeing dark spaces proved harmless. It didn't help. Every time I closed my eyes, the space behind my eyelids was the world's smallest room. The plastic bag breathed on my mouth. The zipper had opinions. My toe felt the urge to kick at nothing. I started noticing cold in a new way. Freezer aisle at the grocery store? Nope. Movie theater? AC vent blowing directly on me? I moved seats. The hum of my refrigerator at night felt like a sound you could get lost in and not find your way back. I told myself it was trauma, because trauma is a word that lets people move on without arguing with you about God. Weeks passed. I got a therapist who didn't flinch when I said I died, because she's paid not to flinch. She had a notebook full of gentle techniques. We breathed together. She taught me to ground my panic in 5 things I could see, 4 I could touch. You know the routine. When I told her about the tapping, she nodded in that therapeutic way that means, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, and I'm not going to stamp this as real either. I also went back downstairs eventually. Not on the job because I wasn't cleared yet, but because I had to look. I found some neutral excuse, paperwork to sign, a security badge that needed replacing. I took the elevator to the basement and followed the smell of chemical lemon and stainless steel memory. Walt was at his desk, scribbling in a ledger that looked too analog for 2020-something. He looked up and went pale in a way that made me feel bad for being alive in front of him. Then he stood and hugged me. His arms were wiry and shaking. The hug was exactly as long as 2 guys can hug before making a joke. He made the joke. It wasn't good, but we both laughed like we were bailing water out of a leaky boat. I checked you, he said again, like he thought I didn't believe it. I swear I checked. You were gone. He gestured to the drawers with an open hand, like introducing the cast of a play. They're not, you know. I know, I said, because I didn't want to be the person who made his job a haunted house. I heard pipes. He nodded, grateful for the lie between us. Can I see? I asked, and jerked my head toward the drawer that had been mine. He hesitated, just a beat. Then he pulled keys from his belt and walked me over. The metal gleamed like teeth. He touched the handle like it was a sleeping dog. The door swung open with that same shrugging sigh. The tray slid out, quiet and smooth. You were right here, he said, and there was an edge of wonder in it, like seeing an empty theater stage where a life-changing scene had played. I put my hand on the tray, just fingertips. Cold went into my skin, up my arm, into my teeth. I swallowed it. The metal made a soft sound, almost like settling, almost like it recognized me. I pulled my hand back and rubbed my fingers together, trying to make warmth appear by friction. I heard something that night, he said softly, not looking at me. Before you yelled. He blinked fast, like there was a flicker in the fluorescent tube above us. I told myself it was the new compressor. We got it replaced last month. They said it'd be quieter. He laughed without joy. It's not. What did you hear? I asked. Tapping. He didn't say it, but I saw the word move behind his eyes. Instead, he closed the drawer with an almost reverent, slow push. We treat them with respect here, he said, and that was both a proclamation and an apology. I went home and tried to stop carrying the morgue around inside me. Some days I did okay. I went to the farmer's market and bought tomatoes that tasted like sun. I let my nieces paint my nails and pretended it was because I was indulgent and not because I liked looking down at my hands and seeing something bright and alive. I learned the names of birds the way some people memorize baseball stats. Living things were my addiction. I subscribed to a channel of live jellyfish cams and watched them glow in blue water, lazy and eternal. But sometimes the world would tilt without warning. A locker room smell, the chime of an elevator, a zipper. Oh God, a zipper. I'd be right back there, mouth pressed to plastic, bargaining with air. People asked me what it was like. Did you see anything? You know what they mean. The light, the tunnel, the thing that makes death make sense. I didn't. I saw darkness, and I heard tapping, and I learned that you can be buried without dirt, and it feels just as permanent. The worst was a month later. I woke up around 3 a.m. because I couldn't breathe. Not panic. No, worse. It felt deliberate. Like the air had thickened into something you could chew but not swallow. I sat up, clawed the dark like it was heavy cloth I could tear. The room was middle of the night familiar. TV black. Streetlights slice across the ceiling. The hum of the building. I heard tapping. 3, 2, 1. It came from my closet. I'd left the door open. Inside, nothing moved. A stack of old shoeboxes, a coat sleeve hanging like a limp arm. I grabbed the nearest weapon, which turned out to be a hardcover cookbook, and stood up like a toddler about to confront a monster and negotiate for better terms. My hand hit the light switch, and the world turned benign. No tapping, no breath, no anything. On the top shelf, I saw the body bag. I'm kidding. Come on. That would be too on the nose. My therapist says jokes are armor. She's not wrong. What I did see was my winter coat. It was the zipper. Not moving, obviously, but the teeth caught the lamplight in a way that sent my heart into a sprint. The sound of that zipper was in my head like a song you hate but can't stop humming. I closed the closet door because I am a coward, and also because sometimes bravery is deciding to breathe again. I sat back on the bed and counted. I counted to my old friend 47, and then to 100, and then to the kind of number you only use when you're trying to build a staircase out of integers. The tapping came again, softer. Not closet, window. I looked. A tree branch? No, there was no tree outside my window. I live above a deli. There's a sign and an alley and a cat with one ear. The sound went away. I lay back down and pictured jellyfish until the space behind my eyes was blue again. Here's what I think, and you can chalk it up to trauma brain or a near-death fever dream. When they put you in a place for the dead, a part of you gets the message. It learns the new rules. The room teaches it how to be still in a way that isn't resting. If you're lucky, and if someone taps, even if you'll never know who or what it was, you get pulled back out. But that part of you that learned to listen in the cold, it keeps listening. It doesn't stop just because you're back in the sun. I never figured out who was in the drawer next to me that night, or if there was anyone at all. Charts say there were 2 occupied bays that evening. Mine's supposed to be one of them. Both accounted for before and after. Walt told me no one was lost. He said it like both a fact and a prayer. I asked him one more thing before I signed myself officially okay to return to the land of the fluorescent and the beeping. I asked him what happens when someone wakes up down there. Not me, not theory. Has it ever happened? He looked at me like a man who has lived too many midnights and said, "Twice in 20 years. You're one of them." He didn't say what happened to the other one. I didn't ask in time. And then the window closed between the where and the when of that conversation, and I never found the key to open it again. I quit, if you're wondering. Not in a dramatic slam your badge on the desk way. I phased out. I took a job doing something adjacent that let me be around life without holding it in my hands. I tell myself I left for balance, for mental health, for reasonable adult reasons. But the truth is, I don't go into basements anymore unless there's a really good reason. And I don't stand in front of big silver doors that close with latches that look like decisions. People love a moral. They want a takeaway that fits on the fridge, Life is precious. Tell people you love them. Double check the toe tag. Sure, all of that. But if you want what I really brought back with me from the cold, it's this. There is a language underneath the noise of the world. You don't hear it until the lights go out and the ceiling presses down and the air tastes like lemons and plastic. It sounds like tapping. 3, 2, 1. It might be a pipe. It might be breath. It might be your own heartbeat coming back online. But if you hear it, if you're in a place where you were never meant to listen and you still do, answer it. Kick. Scream. Find the seam and put your mouth right up against it. Tell the dark your name like it owes you money. That's how I got out. That, and maybe a favor from something that lives where the cold is a kind of forever. Maybe it was a person in the next drawer. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was the building talking in its sleep. Or maybe, just maybe, the dead are kind when we mistake ourselves for them, and they knock to let us know we're in the wrong room. It's been over a year. I'm warmer these days. I unplugged the freezer in my garage and gave it away to a neighbor who wanted to store elk meat, or whatever people with big freezers store. I buy ice cream like a person who understands melting. I still count sometimes. I still check the doors twice. And every once in a while, usually when the night decides to put on its heavy coat, I hear it. Tap, tap, tap. I tap back. Not because I think someone's there, but because I remember being there. And I like to think that somewhere, in some small way, it helps. If you need a happy ending, here. I became the guy who talks to strangers in grocery lines. I remind the checkout kid to drink water. I call my sister on Tuesdays for no reason. I laugh too loud at dumb jokes because loud laughter is a way of telling the dark I'm not available. And if you ever find yourself in a place that's too cold and too quiet and pretending not to be a grave, remember me. Remember the zipper. Remember the rail singing when metal kissed metal. Count to 47. Count to 100. Then kick like the room owes you one. I'm not saying it will save you. I'm saying it saved me. And if you ever end up at my place at 2 a.m, shaking and needing to hear it from my own mouth again, I'll make coffee and tell you. I'll keep my voice casual, the way it is now, like we're just friends swapping weird nights. I'll say it again, the only way I know how. I was buried alive in the morgue, and something knocked. I knocked back. We don't have to agree on what answered. We only have to agree to listen.